Hello again from my front porch. Today, the social studies teacher is coming out. Sorry, but we're going to school. Now, in the past, I've talked about the realities of the Electoral College. I've talked about the realities of what actually happens during impeachment. And I've talked about some of those kind of things, the realities of what the facts actually are around some of those things. Today, I want to talk about specifically about the balance of power and how it is very much messed up currently in our government system. And this has become very apparent in what we are now seeing as the arguments and the hand wringing and the chicken little, oh, the sky is falling kind of stuff that we hear in the lead up days here to the current presidential election. Before I begin this, I do want to qualify by saying I don't like either of the main party presidential candidates. I just don't. And I'm not going to make this a political message, but I also want to be very clear that what I'm about to say is not an attempt to either support or take a dig at either of those candidates. Well, maybe take digs at them, but I would do so equally. But definitely it's not to support either of them. That is not the intent here whatsoever. So anyway, the balance of power, most of us learned in school that there are three branches of government: the executive, the legislative, and the judicial. And then the media, journalism, is often referred to as the fourth estate. It's not a branch of government, but it's considered to be like an integral part of all of this functioning. That the founders were very clear that a fully informed citizenry was necessary for our nation to succeed. Well, not to digress too much, but I would argue that this fourth estate over here has been really bad in doing their job because we do not have a fully informed citizenry. We have nothing close to a fully informed citizenry. We have a manipulated citizenry who only gets to hear bits and pieces that are approved for consumption. But that's a complaint for another day, perhaps. Back to balance of power between the three branches of government over here. The Constitution of the United States was set up very specifically to keep each of those branches of government in check, and that they would all keep each other in balance. Now, when the government was being formed, it said that they actually went to George Washington, who everybody was, hey, we want him. He led the army that helped us fight for our independence. We want him now to lead our country. Everybody was on board with that concept. And they went to Washington and they asked him, would he prefer to be a king or would he prefer to be an elected official kind of person? And that Washington is said to have turned down the opportunity to be a king, saying that that's the last thing that this new nation needed, that this nation needed a government that was the people's government. That's what it needed to be. And so that's supposedly what happened. And so, Washington had a lot to do with the fact that we don't have a king, that we have a president. Well, what that means is we don't have a king. We don't have a monarch. We don't have a sovereign. We don't have an emperor. We don't have a ruler. We don't have a dictator. We have a president. Somewhere over the years that has gotten lost because increasingly we seem to look to government to help us. We seem to look to government to support us. We seem to look to government to solve our problems. We seem to look to government to support us whenever we need support. Now, there are times where that makes complete sense. You have a natural disaster. There's enemy, foreign agents, whatever, even internal domestic terrorism, those kind of things. It makes a lot of sense that government would step in and help with those kind of situations. But we now look to government for far more than that, much more intrusive, in my opinion, things. But back to the balance of power. Those branches were set up to keep each other in check. However, if you really listen to the rhetoric going on right now, you hear a great deal of concern about who is going to be elected president because of what that person can do on their own. With just a swipe of their pen, the power of the executive order has grown exponentially, and it's not a partisan thing. Republican and Democrat presidents have continued to push the boundaries on that and expand it and expand it and expand it. And the legislative branch and the judicial branch that were supposed to keep the executive branch in check haven't done their jobs. They haven't said, wait a minute, Congress itself should have been saying, whoa, hold on, President. You can't, I don't care which president, you can't do that. That's our job as the legislative branch. You can't do that. But the legislative branch has increasingly become spineless jellyfish cowards. And that's I'm being nice because the only thing they seem to stand for anymore is re-election. That as much as possible, they would like to defer actual decision choices, push them off onto the executive or the judicial branch. Case in point, Roe v. Wade, abortion. Abortion is legal. No, actually it's not. Technically speaking, it is not. It is no longer illegal because the Supreme Court said so in Roe v. Wade, but in very few places was there legislation passed, a law passed that legalized abortion. It's been legal because of a Supreme Court decision. Gay marriage is legal throughout the United States now. Is it really legal, or is it just not illegal? People say, well, it's semantics. No, but it shouldn't be semantics. Legal means there's a law. Law is passed by the legislative branch. But we have all of these instances now in which we allow a president to create law by the swipe of his executive pen. And we have all these examples of where the courts are able to create law from the bench by ruling something is illegal. And we just say, well, then that makes it legal. And the legislative branch completely and utterly abdicates their role and what's expected of them. Now, the problem with this is we now are in a situation where you have people literally fight this recent appointment of a new Supreme Court justice, which, again, to take a quick detour over here, I don't like the idea of appointing a Supreme Court justice during a presidential election year for the very reason that we've seen, is because it becomes a political circus. It becomes a political chess match piece. And that process it's never going to be free of politics, but it shouldn't be thrust into this kind of a heated nature. And it has nothing to do with whether I think a Republican or a Democrat should appoint a justice. I just think the nature, the time frame is not good for that. Now, having said that, I don't have any problem with the justice who was recently appointed. I think she seems competent, and watching her answer questions, she seemed to do well. But there is a massive fear that because she is appointed by President Trump, that she is a Republican plant, that she is there specifically to enforce conservative ideology on certain key elements. And so you have people running around who attempted to block her being appointed and who now are saying that if Democrats take control of D.C. After the election, that they should add more people to the court so they can try to offset the now conservative slant of the court. And the reason being because they're worried that a lot of things like gay marriage, the ACA, the Affordable Care Act, abortion rights, all of these things could be undone because of it being a conservative leaning court. Now think about that. Think about that. We're concerned that these things that are supposedly legal throughout the nation can be unraveled by a vote of the Supreme Court justices. Now, if it's unconstitutional, then that's appropriate. If it's being unraveled because it's ideological, that's not appropriate. But that's not even supposed to be what the Supreme Court does. They're not supposed to be writing or unwriting laws. That's the legislative branch, who again has abdicated that to the justices, to the point now that we fight tooth and nail dramatically to try to put the person on the court that we think will not just make good decisions, but will do them in alignment with the ideology that we want to see things done. Because we are expecting now that the court will create and impact law, which they should never be doing in the first place. That's the legislative branch. Meanwhile, you've got the legislative branch members running around seeking re-election, and they're running with just picking at each other, trying to make each other the bad guys and stuff. Nobody really taking a stand on anything or making promises about anything that they're going to do. Why? Because they're increasingly becoming an irrelevant body. Honestly, there is very little that Congress still does that has not been usurped by the executive branch or the judicial branch. I mean, there's bits and pieces. I'm not saying they're totally irrelevant now at this point, but they're moving toward irrelevancy because they have allowed things that were supposed to be the legislative branch, they've allowed many of those things to be co-opted by the other branches. And now we sit here and we honestly look to the president. We want to elect a president who's going to help us out, who's going to do all these things, who's going to do Why? That's never been the president's job to do those things. That's been the legislative branch's job to set up the programs, to create the funding mechanisms, to do all of those kind of things. That's always been the legislative branch. Why do we look to the president for those things? Because we are increasingly becoming comfortable with the idea of one person in DC being in control of our lives. That's the definition of a king, of a sovereign, of an emperor, of a ruler, of a dictator. Yeah, but it's okay as long as we agree. But see, the problem is we don't agree. Our nation is fiercely divided and continues to be so, almost right down the middle ideologically. And the only difference is it seems that one side is a bit more vocal and violent when they don't get their way, which is unfortunate. I would consider that a voter intimidation tactic, frankly, when somebody says, well, we want to do this, either vote the way that we want it to go, or we are going to have this big blow up, that kind of thing. But again, I digress. And I'm about to get a mail package too, a big mail package it looks like. This is interesting. So hold that thought. I'll be right back. Never mind, it seems he took it to the back door. He didn't even see me sitting out here on the front porch. All right, well, thank you, Mr. Mailman. Thanks for doing your job. Have a good day. I'll go back and get it when we're done. Anyway, as I was saying, the three branches, though, are supposed to keep each other in check, but we have allowed the executive branch and the judicial branch way too much authority. When we are this concerned over one justice being selected because it tips the balance of the court, and how that may have massive impacts on all of these dramatic, in all these dramatic ways, on all these social topics and legal precedents, that should be a red flag for us, that we've allowed the judicial branch to become too powerful. And when we are worried about who's going to sit in the Oval Office because we're afraid of what they're going to do with that executive order pen, that should tell us we've let the executive branch become too powerful. It is time for the legislative branch to exert a little authority. And I really honestly hoped that when you had the Democrats against Trump and they were battling up, I was really hoping that we'd firm up some of these things, that finally these things would come to light that I've had issue with President Obama, with President Bush, with President Clinton, with President Bush, with President Reagan. I mean, they've all been doing this stuff. It just kept ballooning and getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And so now we're in this situation where it's the sky is falling, and we don't know what to do because these things are so removed from our control. Again, that's why those things are supposed to be done by the legislative branch, because it is closer to our control. That's why that stuff was supposed to be there. But not much we can do about it this election cycle. We are where we are. My encouragement to each of you, though, is as you see things unfold, as you hear the continued accusations, and even if the parties change, even if power structures change hands and whatever, understand that we are rapidly setting up a system that we were never intended to have. We were never intended to be ruled. George Washington did not want America to have a king, and yet we are rapidly creating one. We need to get off that train of thought. We need to get back to the basics, the fundamentals of what our Constitution was written to say and what the limits on government were. Until we can do that, we are continuing, and we will always continue to have problems. So, anyway, that's your uplifting thought from your social studies teacher. But keep in mind the balance of power. We somehow we need to get back to that. Otherwise, one day we're going to wake up and not recognize our nation anymore. And that is perhaps the scariest thought for me personally. With that, I'll see y'all next time from my front porch.